Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a good lunch. No one got too wet, hopefully, out there. So we're going to start our afternoon sessions of the day. And we're going to be starting with Kim Fitter, who's going to be talking in a speech named The Art of the Maps. So Kim is an engineer at Xero, incorporating machine learning into web development. She has a curiosity for numbers and patterns, love of learning new tools and concepts, working with people and asking questions. When not with her family, watching or participating in a variety of outdoor activities and sports, she is using data of the outdoors to experiment and visualize data and maps. Can you all give a big round of applause to Kim?
Cool. Hopefully you can all hear me. That's all good. So first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the organizers and volunteers at the conference. You're amazing people, and we couldn't all get together without all of you. So I'm going to be talking about the art of maps. I do have the slides on a website. So the slides are available at theartofmaps.netlify.app. So if you do want to have a look at the code, it is there at the end, and if that's what you're keen to look at, you can do during the talk or afterwards. So first of all, who loves maps? Yay! So for the rest of you, I guess hopefully what I'll be doing is convincing you to love and enjoy making maps. So first of all, just to give you a bit of background, I know we had a bit of an intro and bio of me. I thought I'd talk a little bit about me. And so I followed what is probably a non-traditional path to coding. I had a couple of careers before this, and the one just before I was a project manager in big IT projects. And I used to work in waterfall projects, for those of you who did also. You remember what it was like, your big phases of coding and testing. And then a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, I made a change to coding. And I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll go and teach myself a language called R. And I'll try and learn it a bit differently. So I suppose I had formal training before. And at university, let me try and learn this all by myself. Do a few online courses, because that's all you need to do. And then I found myself working as a data scientist in a small startup in Auckland. What I did find from learning R is that I had an interest in data visualization and seeing kind of the shiny tool, the shiny output of code. So after learning R and working in data science, I came across the Dev Academy. And I know there are a couple of you who've been through Dev Academy. So the reason I went to Dev Academy is I thought, I want to learn this language called JavaScript. And that will help me with my data visualization, which I'm really interested in. And went on through the course. And next I found myself as a full stack engineer at Xero. And I work in the app ecosystem. It's an area in Xero where we connect external apps through APIs to Xero. In my day job as a full stack engineer, what I do is I write code for production. So thinking a lot about, we had the previous talk about the CI/CD. It's very intensive, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that CI/CD workflow. You write code, you test. It does need to work well. It needs to be production ready. And it's fairly intense in that kind of thinking. So you are thinking, you're learning new tools. Or you're debugging, which is another story and probably another talk completely. All through this, what I've found myself doing is also organizing meetups. And when I was learning R, I created an R meetup group and organized those. And recently, I've been involved in Xero talks. So this started about 4 months ago, and I'll do a quick pitch for this while I'm here. So it's a technical talk series. They're running in Auckland and Wellington. And we're covering all different topics. So every month, there'll be a different topic. So it'll be front end, back end, hopefully security, DevOps. And it's really about showcasing speakers, but getting people together. And we do have that luxury at the moment where we can meet face to face, which is really exciting. I am on Twitter, so if you want to chat or talk about data viz, or even share some of your work, please reach out. But I'm also keen, while we're here, please do come chat to me in any of the breaks afterwards. So, when I decided to learn how to code, I thought that I was a logical person, I was structured, so I'll learn to code because coding is logical and it's structured. But then I realized that actually coding is creative. So in writing code, you can have this really creative process of putting together your code. But your output of what you can code can be creative, and you can create art. And so in this whole journey of learning to code and experimenting with different tools, I've found a particular interest in maps. So I get really excited about maps. I talk a lot about maps on Twitter, and I follow people that also create maps. So what I would like to do is share some of these maps that I've created with you and talk a little bit about the different maps and what they mean. So thinking about, so one of the things I think about a lot is we have a lot of data in the world. We have a lot of information. So often what we need to do is take all of that information and try and bring it together. And sometimes when we create something to show people or talk about, we make it really complex. We make things really complex. But sometimes there is value in keeping things quite simple. So the first map that I was going to share, we've got a cafe down the road, and just by work, and they've got this amazing wall hanging, and it's a picture of Auckland. And I looked at it one day, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I can make this map. So let me go and find, and I searched around for tools, and I found a tool, and as I mentioned, all the codes at the end of the presentation, where you can put in your location, and what it'll do is it'll generate a map of Auckland city roads. And it uses OpenStreetMap data, which is all open source. And you can create something that, to me, looks like art. I really like maps also because it gives you that spatial context so you can relate to it. So I live in Auckland. And to me, when I look at this map, I go, oh, I know where I live, and I've been around. I have that familiarity and association with the map. This one's also got a bit of a style, which is a bit old school, and it's got quite like the colouring, actually. So as I said, this one is using kind of an open tool. It's something that you can access really easily. You can create the output yourself. Moving on to this example, so this to me is art. And actually, the kind of the color palette itself is called Stamen Watercolor Map Tiles. So this is a palette that's been created by the open source community, and it's been accepted into the Smithsonian Museum as a digital collection. So it's one of the museums called Cooper Hewitt Museum. So to me, that's amazing. The other thing I did with this map was it makes sense to me. It's relatable because it's somewhere where I've been on holiday before. And I'm not sure if anyone can guess where this is. Yeah. So for a lot of you who've lived in New Zealand, traveled around New Zealand, you can look at this, go, oh yes, I've been there before, and I've been to a place. The water's blue, and it's got these beautiful colours and all these little inlets. And this map tile, or the kind of watercolour, it's something that's very similar to something that someone would paint. And to me, it looks like art. The tool that I mainly use for creating maps is it's a tool called Observable. So it's, I think it was created possibly for D3, but what you can do with it is you can access JavaScript libraries and import data into this tool, which is free and open source. And it uses notebooks. So what you can do is very, very easily, you can import data, you can access the libraries, you can create output, you can create data viz really quickly. So there's that kind of reducing or removing that barrier to entry, that barrier to learning something. This one uses a library called Leaflet. Has anyone used Leaflet before? Yeah. To me, it's actually really easy to use. So what you do is you start with a base layer, which you can set your coordinates, and then on top of that, you would add another layer, which is something like your map tiles. That gives it that sort of aesthetic. Okay, next map. This one I really like because what it actually is, there's no map in this map. We do a lot of walking around New Zealand. We love exploring New Zealand. And I was playing with the Department of Conservation doc data one day. So I imported it, plotted on the map, and then I was trying to figure out what palette or colors to use. And in between, I realized that when you actually layer the data on, it's kind of set with the coordinates, so you need the coordinates for the data, it creates a shape of New Zealand. And to me, it's cool because you can see how much people enjoy walking in New Zealand. It really does have this coverage right across New Zealand. So the next map, this is now moving on to D3, which I'll be honest, what I do with a lot of the code and creating these maps is I do get inspired by other notebooks in D3. So very rarely, I don't think I'm an expert yet to create things from scratch. So I get inspired by what other people create, what other people code, and I take that and then I try and do something else with it. This map is using data. So what it does is it actually, you import the topo JSON data, which is a very simplified format, JSON data, and you can merge all the countries and the lands together. And the notebook that I saw had actually taken the data and messed with all the lines, so it was all curved and a little bit. So it's quite fun to play on things where it's not what you expect. And while I was playing around with the code and the data, it made me remember how, and if you're on Twitter, you'll see often there maps where people forget to put New Zealand on the map. And I thought, well, this time, let me see if people notice what island is missing. Yeah. So to me, that's quite fun. It's kind of playing with the maps, playing with something that you're familiar with. This map, to me, I got really excited about creating this map. It uses one of the the D3 JavaScript libraries called D3 Tube Map. And so I thought, well, I've got this library. What I can do is I can use the colors and the aesthetics of the map and then start playing around. And I lived in London for a while, so I traveled on the tube. And to me, this is very familiar, and I can relate to all the stops on the line because in your head, you're on the tube, the same as trains. You remember your stop, and you remember which ones are coming up next. So the other thing, then when I was playing with the map, I thought, well, what if I mess around with the colors and the tube names? So then I went off on a tangent, like you sometimes do, and was reading up about different blue palette names, and I tried to find all these different names for the stations. So I got really excited by this map. I thought, oh, this is really cool. And I've shown it to different people, and I'd say almost everyone looks at me and just with a blank face. They don't really get it. Which is fine. I think sometimes it's okay to have a really great idea, try and generate something, and then go, well, that didn't work. So why create map art, or why create data visualization? For me, it was very much a way of learning. And I think what I've what I've realized over time is that we do learn to code, and often it can be very challenging. That learning curve can be really, really steep. And so what you should do sometimes, and it's not always possible in your day jobs, because that is what you're doing is you're creating that production-ready code. And it can be a curve to learn the code, add all the tests, do all the debugging. But to keep learning and enjoying learning, you need to actually code in things that you enjoy and relate it to the interests that you have and actually you can relate to. For me, something like Observable, there might be other tools out there because I'm very tool agnostic. Using tools that are very accessible, there's a very low barrier to entry. And so what you can do is you can pick it up, you can write a few lines of code, and you have something cool, sometimes cool. You can also create very simple prototypes. So what we do often is that we'll create something, and it'll get really complex really quickly. So then we'll go off on those tangents. And we don't necessarily get feedback as quickly as we could. So if I'd gone and written that tube map from scratch and written all the code and got it all absolutely right and then shown people, they're gone, not really what we were after, what we were thinking, I would have lost all that time and not necessarily got the feedback. And feedback is so important. It really is, in terms of validating your idea for whatever it is, whatever product you're working on. So we can transfer these skills back into our day jobs and really kind of listen to people and get different ideas. Maybe someone would say, well, that color didn't work. How about using this color? And that's not something you would not necessarily have thought about. When you create data visualization, it is very visible. So you're creating things that you can share. You can connect with communities that you didn't actually realize were out there. What I've realized is there are other people that really like maps. And so you can connect with them. It doesn't have to be Twitter, it can be other channels. And you can share those interests. And then in turn, you can also share that technical knowledge and things that you've learned. I have realized that when I started coding, I thought, I'll just learn one language. And then there's this one community, and I'll hang out in this community. But what's amazing about tech is you have so many different languages, so many different tools and interests. So there are all these kind of layers of communities and intertwined communities that you can learn from. And an unexpected thing that I discovered is if you're creating something and you're coding something. I heard someone say once that if you code something and you write it on your computer, it actually doesn't mean anything, and it's not useful until you share it, until you show it to someone else. So if you're in a workplace, if you just sit on your computer and you don't merge it into production, I could argue it's not necessarily code. But by creating something on your computer, you can get excited about it, you can share it, you can create a public profile, create blogs, and that's really good for building that profile, because that is something that I didn't realize is so important. Super. So as I mentioned, all the code is available. So the link, that first Auckland maps, city roads, there's the link to the tool. The Observable notebook, I've put all the maps in there. I did also sneakily make my presentation in R. It's using a package called Xero, but that is in itself an R Markdown extension based on the JavaScript library remark.js. So I did use JavaScript. And the library, the code is all available on my GitHub profile. So thank you so much. I hope that I've inspired you to learn something new, create some maps, And if you have any questions or you'd like to talk about anything I've covered today, please catch up with me in any of the breaks. Cool.
Questions from the audience?
I was wondering how you find map data or GPS type data. What data are you looking for when you want to actually map it?
What I sometimes do is if I've done something like a walk, I would go and see Google walk data. So then you kind of look through the Google results. I've done other maps on, I think we went to Ruapeu. I was like, oh, what data is there for Ruapeu? And there's so much open data available that you can kind of source and use and create something. So, yeah.
Do you have a creative process for deciding on how you actually present your data?
No. I wing it most of the time. I'd love to have more of a kind of design process, but I think that's something that hopefully I'll learn over time. And we work with a lot of designers at work, so hopefully I can kind of get that from, suck their brains for and learn from them. Yeah. I'd love to hear if you have any suggestions or any ideas on it. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much.